try our best to ultimately undo all the fucking of black people over the last 2 centuries. We're doing our best here. We can't undo history, and we can't undo all the damage done. All we can do now is try to compensate for that, and I guess try our best to simulate what modern America would look like if slavery hadn't been endured by African Americans for so long. So ultimately, the directionless spending by black people, without any kind of incentive to how to spend the money, would probably result in them buying a bunch of shit from white people ultimately, which ultimately result in like indirect wealth transfer to white people. Which that is my issue with it more so than anything else.
So there you go, white people. That's a stimulus for y'all. Give us reparations, more money for white people. Thank you, thank you, Trihex. Thank you, Trihex, for letting white people know what's in it for you. Y'all own all the means of production. You own everything. Y'all gonna get your cut. Give us reparations so you can get your cut. There you go.
Listening to Reset Race. You're now tuned in to Reset Race. You're listening to Reset Race. You're now tuned in to Reset Race. What? Put them back on the grill again. We grilling them. Put them back on the grill again. We grilling them. Put them back on the grill again. We grilling them. Back on the grill again. We grilling them. You're listening to Reset Race. ADOS need reparations to make America great. You're tuned in to Reset Race. We no longer starving while others eat off our plate. No. You're listening to Reset Race. We focused on our justice claim. We know what is at stake. You're tuned in to Reset Race. You'll find out who really about justice and really who fake. Lineage go back to U.S. Southern plantations. Lineage, Jim Crow and mass incarceration. Redline and lynchings. We are old from this nation. You're not about justice if you ain't for reparations. MG the wise one. Cousin Mother intellectual. Samantha bringing fire. Anti-black we pressing you. No permanent friends and no permanent enemies. The backbone of the country. The win. You need our energy. You gon' see. Listening to Reset Race. You now tuned in to Reset Race. You're listening to Reset Race. You're now tuned in to Reset Race. Put them back on the grill again. We grilling them. Put them back on the grill again. We grilling them. Put them back on the grill again. We grilling them. Back on the grill again. We grilling them. You're listening to Reset Race. ADOS need reparations to make America great. You're tuned in to Reset Race. We no longer starving while others eat off our plate. No. You're listening to Reset Race. We focused on our justice claim. We know what is at stake. You're tuned in to Reset Race. You'll find out who really about justice and really who fake.
Welcome to Reset Race, where we talk about race, and especially as it pertains to race and politics in the United States of America and how it impacts people who descend from slaves here in the country. So, with that said, I think I said I was Michael Graham from Active Right Press. All right, in any event, I'm going to introduce you to the team, or they're going to introduce themselves, and we're going to start from the top. Ladies first, of course. That's how we get down. And Sam, talk to the people.
Yeah, I know, it's so weird, right? All right, so I'm Samantha Angelique. You can sometimes find me on Twitter at me17trillion, but I've been taking a break from you people. But I will probably be back at some point, but I'm about to go on vacation, so I'm really not going to be bothered. But hey, I'm looking forward to tonight and see what this BS will be, and let's have some fun. You know, I'm in for a good roast.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right. Oh, and I'm back on Twitter for another 5 minutes. It's ActifyMG_RR, as in Romeo. All right. Big John, talk to him.
Yeah, I am here. This is John C. You know what I mean? The average American Negro that descends from chattel slavery. Yes, I do. Okay, if you don't like it or not. But yeah, follow me on Twitter if you want to. I'm at John Danny OC, back with the fam. Let's get into it. Make it short and sweet. Let's just do it. Fuck it.
Mud, go ahead and talk to him, man.
All right, they call me Mud. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Clubhouse, all at Of Lineage. Bitter Dose TV is back. So just stay tuned in. All right, let's get to it.
But can we not pretend like there aren't whole TV shows with white people just showing off them buying houses and cars and buying jewelry and shit for their women?
Yeah. Lifestyles of the rich and famous. Yeah.
All them Real Housewives shows, like there's only a couple with black people. The majority of them is white people. all these fix your house shows and stuff like that.
Mhm.
People be using inheritance, do all kinds. You ain't sitting here telling these white people to stop buying jewelry and fancy dresses
Mhm.
and nice purses.
Yeah, but
So,
they're white people. They deserve that stuff.
Why you
mhm.
buying $1 million little ass house? That house, little as hell, worth $1 million. Like, real shit, it's a little house. It's being eco-friendly, but I got, first of all, I got a satellite dish. I got
Solar
Wi-Fi
panels.
out of nowhere.
First of
Nobody got
all,
Wi-Fi.
first of all,
Nobody in the
it's
area got Wi-Fi. I
$1.2
got
million
Wi-Fi.
and it's a townhouse.
That's what I'm saying. Like, just regular shit. Like, I'm just living this little. I'm being compact. Feel like I'm talking about no white lefties will do that shit too. I'm growing
Mhm.
produce on the motherfucking top of this storage garage. Feel like I made it to a home. How many black people you know could buy a storage? Feel me, a storage container and make that shit to a home, like a real livable home and shit like that. You know how much money that shit costs? I'm being conservative with this money. This shit like $1 million to do some shit like that. Like, let me find it.
They'll have like $80,000-$90,000 to go and build some shit. It's like, I ain't got 10 grand.
Mhm.
What you got in the $4,000 range?
Exactly. Ain't that
Yep.
$4,000? You can't even buy the container. You can't buy the container with the $4,000. So that's good.
Yeah. Yeah, I think all this stuff, like we all agree, and the numbers agree, is this is all, as John said, racist bullshit that we've imbibed in, and we've been bathed in our whole lives. All right, we know the data. Not everybody knows the data. Even people that know the data don't believe it, because that's not what I learned when I was growing up. Niggas spend too much money, right? So they still gonna believe what they're gonna believe, right? All right, family, y'all good as we move on?
Yeah, let's go.
So, anything else?
Just because this is a pretty important point. I'm just because it's a big one that Irrelevant brought up. So in asking that, should it matter whether or not the money would help or anything? In looking at like another scenario, like let's say somebody owes you money and you did a job, or your parents did a job and somebody owes you money, and let's say that your living situation sucks and now you're trying to collect on that debt. Is it fair that the person says, well, hold on, even if I give you this money, I don't think it's going to help much? Is that argument sufficient to negate the fact that it's a debt that's owed to you or your family? It's kind of like the central point of this.
So it's kind of like if my friend owes me $1, but I'm already like a multi-billionaire, like,
or more so, like let's just say, well, I guess we don't even have to use.
Where are all these rich Negroes that this dude's talking about?
In the NBA, answering to an owner.
Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
What if I give all these black athletes reparations?
why do they keep talking about $1 million to one?
Oh, I never even thought about that. What happens when we get reparations? What happens to college football if we get reparations?
It's over.
God damn, John, that was a good point.
Listen. I have a friend.
That gave me chills. God,
listen, I have a friend who is a coach in the NFL right now and don't want his son to play football.
We won't use hypothetical actually here. Let's say that we give let's say hypothetically we pass reparations for African Americans, and the reparations is $1,000 to every African American. Let's say that every single African American goes and buys a big screen TV, and that's what they do with the money. Is that even if that was the case, would that be an argument against paying what we believe is morally owed? Or if they want to spend it on whatever, do they have the right to do that? Is the question.
So it would entirely depend, I guess. So from my perspective, it would absolutely matter, because I only really care about a lot of these things to the capacity that I want to help the community essentially tread water or even thrive. So if it became aware to me, because I actually agree with Trihex, if it became aware to me that the situation that Trihex is proposing was the case, I would simply change, instead of direct cash payments, I would take the same amount of money as the direct cash payment and just put it into a separate system that helps them more efficiently allocate those.
No.
So again, can we do this to white people's inheritance?
Nope.
So we need a test, right? We need like a SAT test, like those racist tests, but black people should be able to make them. And how the test should go is you should have to be able to pass a certain level for you to be able to get your inheritance. If not, it should be given for community development in your community.
I mean, but did you actually listen to what they said? They're talking about $1,000.
Yeah, we heard that was some bullshit.
Yeah, we knew that was bullshit. That's a given.
You might as well buy the big screen TV. You might as well buy the shit.
Yeah, exactly.
Did you hear what I said?
I'm
I'm gonna go buy me a crossbow And
Yeah, I need more rounds for a couple of things. Yeah, absolutely.
you know what? Like for real, we should.
Y'all niggas ain't shit.
Yeah, I think it is some bullshit, but I
would
mean,
crack
even
a joke, but since these white people just stormed the Capitol, I'll keep it to myself.
yeah,
Right.
Dr. Darity did post he did say like there would be a trust fund like for minors or for folks that may be mental based on mental capacity, stuff like that, or so there is some spongible middle ground, but that money will be in their name, and they'll be able to do with the principle of it what they choose to do. Now, one of my biggest fears, and you hear it a lot in Cobra and narc circles, right? You hear that they don't want to pay anybody any money. They want to put it all in one big slush fund, and organizations like narc and or and Cobra manage that slush fund.
Yeah, Freedmen's Bureau.
Yeah, like the Freedmen's Bureau, or even worse. But I think, and they're over in the Democratic Party. Over with the Democratic Party. This is my guess. I think that is driven by Wall Street, because Wall Street love a slush fund like that, and they get paid. They get paid millions, trillions of in dollars over the years to manage the fund, right?
Of course.
And they will funnel it to whoever their friends are, and that should be gone within 20 years.
Yep.
Right. That's what'll happen to it, just like it happened in the Freedmen's Bureau, and we end up getting fucked, right? And
that's the goal.
And the people that get the oversight, they'll run off with like a container full of cash, be good, right? And we all get fucked. So we need to avoid that. All right. Anybody else?
And then even when they talk about it should go to businesses, it should go to education, go to this. Mm-hmm. Everything you're talking about really just helps the top 10% of Blacks. So thank you. Like, thank you for making my future children's lives better and for fixing my life. But, what about everybody else?
Yeah.
The fuck?
Yeah. Everybody thinks we should forget about the current problems. And that's like the baby bonds thing, right? So my kids get baby bonds, right? And how does that work?
Poof.
Yeah,
that's the end of it.
Yeah, that's the end of it. And when they turn 18, they got a little bit of cash, and that gets sunk into college, or sunk into buying a home, which is cool. Both of those are cool if you can avoid the debt that goes with those things. But we're talking like a down payment on a house, on a decent house.
Well, they white families, Meryl said they feel me like something basically the white families and some of these bougie Blacks is gonna have. And even the bougie Blacks, they understand that like they being used as pawns to this shit. Like, like I say, bro, like even if you're at the top of Black society, you understand that it's still racial bias towards you. When you doing better than all the Black people, you doing better than poor white people. You still a nigga though. Poor white person be like, man, shut up. I'm gonna blow your brain out because I don't even like you in my store. You like, what, sir? What? What? I have a bow tie on. Shut up. No, that be that. You know what I mean? And that be that. And they like, and everybody try to make it, real shit. Like, I'm talking about, he was a Harvard professor, but he did smoke weed in 1979. He smoked weed in 1979. I was with him. And then he justified. He's a thug. He going. Like, real shit. Like, you still got to deal with that at the top because your people ain't doing. Yeah, people ain't living at a certain level as at the median, the mean, or as the like just even at the medium level, while people ain't having a certain amount of collective power in the country. Like, like that shit leave you exposed, so you exposed at the bottom and at the top. You know what I mean? Like
that wealth gap persists no matter where you are, right? That wealth gap persists. Like we've mentioned several times on this show, from Irony. He said that Iron Mills, a friend pond for anybody who doesn't know, future friend of the show. He says that if Jeff Bezos woke up with Oprah's money, he'd kill himself before the day was over. And it's true.
Yeah.
It's true. He wouldn't know what to do if he had Oprah's money. And she's the cream of the crop for us. So we need to understand these things, and we need to take them in, and as they say on Clubhouse, sit with that for a minute and really work it out.
Well, you've been on Clubhouse too long. Get MG on Clubhouse, but you can go on
drive you crazy. Yeah, we'll do Clubhouse stories one day. All
right, too, but
Bud, what you got?
Hey, Sam too. All right,
yeah.
Nah, shit. I don't know. I mean, I kind of want to see some more. I don't really got nothing right now.
Okay, Sam.
More efficiently allocate those funds. to help their lives. So if every single black person was going to spend $1,000 on a big screen TV and not help their economic situation at all, I would perhaps start looking into, hey, every black person gets $1,000 that, I don't know, goes in their 401k or something like that, or helps to pay off credit card debt or something like that. I think that would probably be more efficient to be able to help those individuals be able to pursue like further. I will like die on the hill of that. That is in effect quite literally taking away their autonomy to spend their own literal contractually obligated cash.
So since he said he's willing to die on that hill and we're in a very sensitive time, I'm willing to push him off of that hill.
Push his bloody corpse off that hill.
He said he's willing to die on it. So after he dies of his own fruition, I'm going to just roll his body off the cliff.
Yeah.
So I'm not doing any killing. He said he was going to die on that hill on his own. I'm just going to roll the corpse over the fucking hill.
Yeah, I think we're just screaming about the $2,000 that Joe Biden is going to give us, and I don't think any rational person thought that was going to happen.
Do you think we're even going to get the 1,400?
It's shaky because the Senate is handing over power to the Republicans as we speak. It's what they do every time they get in power. So I doubt
damn
it.
Shame.
Yeah, it's a damn shame. It's how they get down. But I think, but nobody's saying, okay, we're going to give you this $2,000 or $1,400 or $600, but only spend it on X, Y, and Z, right? And it's not even a debt that's owed to these people, right? So I got robbed, and you want to manage how I spend my money, but everybody else, because there's a pandemic, we got to help everybody out and stimulate the economy. We got to just give them the money. But wait a minute, why are we just giving people the money? But when it comes to our debt, we can't manage our own money. This is all rooted in fears of us being successful and them not being able to prey on us. That's what it's all rooted in. Because when you want to hit a lick, you find a way to hurt black folks. Nobody will bother you. You know?
Ooh, because imagine them check cash in places, all the places going out of business, all those payday loans and shit.
Yep, liquor stores.
When you get $80,000 a year in that rebate, for the most part, you shouldn't have to get a payday loan.
Mm-hmm. Yep. You should not. You know, I mean, but I don't know, man. It's just frustrating to hear this stuff from black people. But again, we have to give people some grace because we've been more or less in an echo chamber for a long time talking about these issues. I didn't realize how much of an echo chamber that was until recently. Clubhouse.
I did. Yeah, Clubhouse was an eye opener for me. I showed. Oh my God, why did I show my reparationist group the MLK Boondocks speech? And I was like, I know some of y'all gonna be offended that I'm playing this in front of white folk, but I don't care. Because he had to drop like 10, 15 N-bombs, but at the end he was like, I know I'm not gonna get there with you. I'm going to Canada. I was like, I ain't going to Canada. But let me tell you, between the shit white people keep saying, the shit these Negroes keep saying, man.
Yeah. Sometimes, man, you listen to these people talk, you feel kind of hopeless. But I'm trying to remain hopeful. Got kids and grandkids, got to remain hopeful.
Literal contractually obligated cash. So yes, I would agree with that.
Okay, if we're agreeing that reparations are due for an action that was done in the past, what are we attempting to do here? The monetary compensation to me is just like your easiest avenue to explore for how to right that wrong, or to the best of our ability in this case here, undo the wrong. We're trying to undo the wrong. We can't undo the wrong, so the best thing we can do at this point is consider elevating their quality of life and or the structure of their of all the oppression that they currently feel and endure. So it goes back here to the whole bettering society here. Do I agree here to give them complete free agency to like spend their money on trivial consumer shit, which is just a temporary high, as opposed to reconsidering the pursuit of a better society that is doing its best to simulate if slavery hadn't existed or hadn't been performed upon by black people for so freaking long.
Wait, so I'm kind of curious then for both of you, as succinctly as you can answer, what would be the goal of reparations if they did exist?
But part of that is the lack of investment from government into our communities, right? That's where that issue is, not from government to us individually, but from lack of investment into our communities, right? So we're talking about more broadly infrastructure, like we've spoken about, infrastructure, education, things the government is supposed to do anyway. Why are you going to take our reparations money, the debt that is owed, to take care of that issue? That's not the point of this. All right, that's all I had. Anybody?
Yeah, I can't even engage with this shit because they only talking about $1,000. This is some bullshit.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
like why
I was just
exactly? Why
thinking
are we
that.
even having a conversation? Like you really would be mad at people for spending $1,000 on a TV?
That goes back to the fact that these guys really don't know the nuts and bolts of this discussion, right? That's part of the problem, is that they're approaching this because $1,000 is not life changing money. $80,000 a year for a decade is life changing money, right? That's 2 to 3 checks, 2 to 3 job checks coming in the house, all right? So people don't view it when you understand the numbers, at least the minimum numbers that Darity talks about, not to mention Kramer's numbers where he goes, right? When you start talking about numbers like that, this trivial shit they're talking about doesn't even apply. So they're in a different they're discussing this on a different planet, right? They're discussing this like I don't know. Anyway, anybody else got anything on that?
Yeah, man. Nah, it's like I think it's what we talked about before. Like they try to scare us, and they saying like if we give Negroes $1,000, say hey, the whole country hurting, and we just gave Negroes $1,000, white people gonna try to kill you. Like they try to kill us every
Yeah,
day.
right. That's the only thing they haven't
They
said
try to
yet,
scare
right?
real shit like you mud with mud.
They didn't hit us with the Witcher Wolf yet.
Like, yo, it's a threat. Yo, they really threaten. I'm like, yo, see, these 2 black people got back into the threat. Like, you feel me? Everybody need $1,000. Say we just gave them $1,000. The white people are gonna try to hurt them. I'm like, they don't try to hurt us every fucking day.
Yeah, they try to hurt us all the time.
Fuck them niggas then. I don't give a fuck. Give me my $100 they ain't get. Give me my turkey sandwich. Say the turkey sandwich. I need turkey. Give me my turkey sandwich then. I don't need like we care something like that. Like they ain't gonna come hurt us one way or the other. Like we poor, they try to come hurt us every day. Can I at least have a turkey sandwich, my nigga? Like what the fuck are you talking about? So I mean, like I felt like that was mad potency. You said that they played into them fear tactics. Like yo, white people ain't gonna like the fact that you. So what? Like yeah, I mean, like it's old to us.
Yep.
Them like real shit. Like it's old to us.
Yeah, like we like the fact that like our ancestors like the fact that they were slaves, or
And
that our ancestors like the fact that these white people kept fucking burning down our towns and running up in our homes and raping our women and stealing our shit and burning our shit down. I don't think we like that either, but it happened.
Yeah, that's again part of the problem, is that's how white supremacy wins. Fear, terrorism, right? Fear of terrorism. That's what terrorism is all about. Using violence or the fear of violence to accomplish a political or social aim. That's what it's all about. And at this point, we're facing genocide. We can't be negotiating with no goddamn terrorists, no matter what color they are.
What would be the goal of reparations if they did exist? Trax just kind of answered that. Irrelevant. What would your answer be to that? What should the goal of reparations be?
If reparations was to be passed, I think that the goal of it should be to substantially improve the material as well as societal and hopefully mental well-being of a lot of black people that were disenfranchised and are actively being disenfranchised by systemic racism. I think that should really be the goal of reparations. I don't really see any other legitimate reason why, or any other legitimate goal for reparations, in my opinion.
Okay, and then so Trax, what do you think if reparations were to be paid out? What should the goal of reparations be? Like, what is the goal? What are you trying to accomplish with that?
How was any of that tangible? Like all that bullshit he just said, was any of that tangible? Like
Nope.
how do we measure that? Like what he said, how do we measure that? Because I can just say, well, blacks are doing better now. We put a couple, we put some extra computers in the classes and we gave everybody iPads. We didn't check to see if they had internet at home, but we gave everybody iPads.
No, actually, he's talking about we paid $1,000 on their credit card bill.
Like they,
And now they're doing better.
like yeah. I don't understand. Like it's so off. It's so off. I can't live or breathe or think. I don't know what y'all got. I'm sorry. I did stop it kind of quick, but I just when I was listening, I was like, what does that mean?
Reparations come ultimately to simulate to the best of our capability to undo the wrong that was done, in particular in context of slavery here, right? Or which is the one thing that like stampedes and snowballs into everything else here. Segregation, civil rights being granted officially, eventually to the best of its capability, and all the like subconscious discriminatory policies that have affected us to this day, including gerrymandering, redlining, and all the things that are done to underpower Black democracy in this country, which is intrinsically an American pursuit, if I recall correctly here.
So, I mean, I think just about everything that you said is agreeable. Just about literally everything. The only thing that I can think of that I might have a point of contention on is the framing of undoing the wrongs of the past. The only issue that I really have with that is that I fear that if reparations become a thing, especially in the near future, what might end up happening is something similar to what happened, like a microcosm of what happened with Obama, where there's a bunch of people that might think that, well, you know how there was people that excuse me, thought that when Obama was elected, like racism is over. Like we did it. We have a black president. I fear that if we frame it as undoing the wrongs of the past, people might consider cash reparations as being, hey, why are you complaining about racism? That's what we paid you for, right? Like you can't do, what are you talking about? This is what we paid you for. So I wouldn't really consider reparations as undoing the past, but more of what you said a little bit later, which is
Then that's because you guys are framing it wrong. Reparations is a debt that is owed, and that's it.
Yeah, for past harms. It isn't just
For past harms. There you go.
Yeah, it's not some ambiguous solution for all racism until the end of time. Like, what the fuck? Yeah, if you like, all right, you pay reparations, and then what? You think you can like do redlining all over again, and because you pay reparations, it's no big deal? Like, no, that's not how it goes. You do some more fucked up shit, then
We gonna have an issue again. More punishment. Let's rock.
past, but more of what you said a little bit later, which is an apology for the past, right? It's an apology, but not an undoing. Yeah, so something that I guess I also kind of wanted to make pretty clear as well when it comes to the number, because yeah, that's what I was running through that same argument in my head as well. It's like, if you really do this accurately, it's going to be a really, really high number. And that high number, relative, well, at least relative to what I think a lot of people would consider, maybe it should be. I think it's a high number. I think that there's going to be a lot of people, especially that are going to really fall into the effect that I was previously mentioning, as the number increases, which is that, they're going to think that, racism is done. The more that people are going to pay, let's assume that the number was like crazy and they paid it like $50 trillion, right? And they paid $50 trillion. They would, I'm pretty sure every single person in the United States would say, okay, I want to never hear about racism ever again, right? And then so I think that it's just kind of a microcosm of that. I think no matter how high you go, or depending on how high you go with the number, there's going to be more and more people that we're going to have to fight the narrative of if we're going to make this a thing. We're going to have to fight the narrative of them trying to push the idea that racism is finished because that's what we paid $6 trillion, $7 trillion for, right? As racism is now over. So I just really, I agree with the idea that the number should be that high. I just fear for political implementation and political cohesion when it comes to tackling systemic racism after that point, after reparations has been paid.
So I guess the thing that I really wanted to tease out in these arguments is like, should reparations be treated as like a form of like federal stimulus to African American communities, or should it be treated as like the repayment of a debt? It's kind of like
100% stimulus. In my opinion.
And then it seems like both of you guys kind of fall more on the side of like it should be treated more as like a stimulus kind of thing.
So
Fired. Stimulus, bruh. If you don't get out of here with that, this is a debt. Is not a stimulus. You. What part of debt? Man, these folks ain't serious.
this is like, it's frustrating because you know this motherfucker really doesn't know
Anything?
anything. Like he doesn't have even like the basis to go off of, and he's like sitting here talking like an expert with like extreme confidence, and it's just
Get his Adolf Reed on.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying?
But with less stuttering.
Yeah, right. Like, I'm gonna yo, that shit. Yo, yeah, go ahead. My bad. Yeah, go ahead.
Nah, up you go.
Nah, man. Like, come on. Hey, ma, you know the fuck going on. Hey, say y'all, everybody, we all know over here what's going on. You know what he doing? This shit, like this shit is like he's motherfucking making these arguments and shit like that. You feel me? Like these arguments don't make any fucking sense if you know what the fuck going on. If somebody that don't know what's going on is like, yeah, it's a black dude. Because his whole, like what Sam said at the beginning of the whole shit, like his whole shit is, I agree with everything you just said, but what about, I agree with everything, but what about, yeah, it's definitely justice, but what about whataboutism? Just what about this and what about, nigga, ain't talking about what about this, man. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, nigga, where your grandmama from? I feel like that was making me present. Like, where your granddaddy and them from? They from over here. What the fuck is you doing? Like, what is you doing? Like, you know what I mean? Like, real shit. Like, it's sad because they got a grip to get into a space where they can get some money. That shit's sad. I mean, like, that shit's sad to me, man. Like, I'm like, yo, bro, like, why don't you just? I feel like if you really believe in this shit, and I feel like they just feel like it's a debate. It's a debate. It's just a good hot debate. They don't really care if we get justice or not. They don't care.
All right, let's try to finish this shit because it's almost over, right?
Yeah, this one, and then we'll just have to leave that last one for another time because I can't sit through a whole nother. And I'm sure they don't know who it's supposed to go to either. So,
of course they don't.
And then it seems like both of you guys kind of fall more on the side of like it should be treated more as like a stimulus kind of thing. So revisiting back the idea that a promise was made, there was like a specific promise made to black labor, black like slave labor, to black people that were slaves in compensation for their labor. There was a specific promise that was made regarding like land and territory and whatnot that would be given to African Americans, to slaves and the descendants of said slaves. And then that promise, the U.S. government basically walked back on. I feel like there's an argument that whether the money stimulates the economy, whether people spend it appropriately, whether it helps anybody at all or anything at all, that money ought to be paid just on virtue of the fact that it was promised to be paid. Let's say that in any other circumstance, let's say that you find out that like 100 years ago, there was some contract where your family was promised some money because somebody was never paid their wages for a lifetime's worth of work. And you found this out and you were able to enforce this contract. Like if somebody was like, oh, well, you don't need the money now. Like, does that make it okay to not pay out what was owed there?
I wouldn't necessarily say that makes it okay. So in my given example as being, I would say perhaps slightly more antagonistic than Trihex towards direct cash payments, the difference I would make is that it's not necessarily that you wouldn't pay the person back, but that you might pay them back in a specifically different way.
Yeah, but so just pushing back again, the paying somebody back in a specific way seems to be like a very patronizing and condescending way to do it.
Yeah.
Let's say that somebody works for me for 5 years and I never pay that person for their labor. And then at the end of it, they're like, yo, you enslaved me. I want to be paid. This is bullshit. And you're like, okay, well, I'm going to give you a $10,000 gift card to Target for clothes. I'm going to give you a $5,000 gift card to Kroger's for groceries. And then I'm going to give you a $20,000 investment fund for your education. Like, that person would probably be feeling pretty fucked because it's like, listen, I don't want you to tell me how to spend my money. Like, you owe me this money. I'm working for money, not for you to tell me where I have to spend it. Why should you be allowed to dictate how a person that you owe like cash to, or in this case land, or the cash equivalent to land, why should you be allowed to dictate how they spend their money?
I would say in this scenario, it would be kind of different in the case that we have in the United States with black people, because we've uniquely fucked over black people in their capacity to be able to have the level of financial literacy that we would want them to have to be able to make the decisions that we would want them to make in the appropriate manner, to be able to lift themselves up from their financial strata.
I gotta tell you, Professor Darity, I felt a little bit convicted, because you said something to the effect of financial literacy ain't gonna get it. And I thought I was doing something good, Sandy. And, so I do a fair amount of that, both professionally in the companies that my partners and I run, and also in schools and such. And your very well backed up and documented research said that ain't gonna cut it. Can you talk about why that is not?
It won't cut it in isolation.
Okay. Sure.
Yeah. So what I always say is, financial literacy without finances to manage is not going to get you anywhere. So I mean, the presumption that you could use financial literacy or financial management skills alone as a mechanism for building wealth without any initial pool of resources to play with is actually asking you to be an alchemist, really. So financial literacy without finances to manage is the same as giving somebody a menu without giving them any food to cook. But if we were to have a reparations program in place where individual Black Americans would receive a significant amount of resources that would be different from the resource position that they've ever had, then that might be a circumstance in which it's extremely useful for people to receive some type of financial management or financial literacy skills. It would be particularly important for them to receive skills in terms of detecting fraud. That's going to be, it's going to be heavily directed against them in the aftermath of receiving some significant amount of resources from a reparations project. And so then the kind of work that you're doing might have a tremendous effect on enhancing the kind of economic security, the capacity to accumulate additional wealth on the part of the recipients of the reparations payments. But I guess the main point we're trying to make in that report is that you're not going to be able to close the racial wealth gap simply by providing people with better information about how to manage their funds. That you've got to give them a significant amount of funds to work with, comparable to the amount of resources that many white Americans already possess.
I understand that consequentially speaking, like that targeting could happen. But when we say like uniquely fucked, like I think there's some stuff that's like not necessarily that unique here when it comes to like a concept like intergenerational wealth. Like it seems really silly to think, man, like, are you really going to get $300,000 because your great-great-grandpa was a slave? Like, that seems really fucked up. But the reality is that type of wealth transfer happens in white families all the time, right? My great-grandpa, my great-great-grandpa, was in oil or something, and, my family has millions of dollars, and now I get this, blah, blah. Like, we see that type of intergenerational wealth transfer happen all the time. It just doesn't happen in the form of, like, here's a cash payment. It's a lot more subtle than that. You live in good houses, you go to good schools, you've got good connections, you inherit some money because you get it when your parents die, they buy things for you, right? So I guess it feels a little bit bad to me that when it comes time to when it comes time to pay somebody back, I guess, for a promise that was made and then never delivered on, or just for past wages, you're like, now all of a sudden we're worried about all this. Well, hold on, wait, hold on. Well, we give them all their money. What if people target them poorly and blah, blah, blah? And it's like, well, what if they do? I mean, it's their money. It's not really our decision necessarily to say like, well, if you get this money, you better make sure that you invest it well. Like, it just feels unfair to do that to African Americans whose families have been like destroyed for years and more importantly, forget the destruction part, who just like had labor stolen from them, like literally stolen from them, to not repay them because we're worried that they're not going to spend the money in the most responsible way possible, I guess.
Right. So I feel like an apt analogy would be like if a white person, let's say, is having an inheritance right, towards their child, should the child not have a financial literacy test or what have you? Or am I just going to run with the assumption that they know how to spend their money, whereas like I'm not running with said assumption when it comes to black people, just based on entirely upon the color of their skin? Which, yes, I would ultimately have to agree with the idea that because of the systemic things, so specifically what you're trying to get at is it is owed to them. They have the right to indiscriminately spend that funds however they so please. And I don't necessarily disagree that would be just and great, but I think that ultimately speaking, practically is I would make an argument of practicality more so than morally when it comes down to this. I would want to secure black wealth more than I'd want to secure the morality or the shaking of hands.
The exercising of absolute agency in the money they spend.
Yeah, I think I think I would be willing to subvert a level of autonomy in order to ensure that black people have their wealth secured.
Yeah, I agree with that. Triax brought up a really good point earlier, though, that kind of made me reconsider this point. In that, like, let's say that you have a building that has like one room in it, and let's say we want to expand this building, and let's say that if we were to expand it normally, where we all work together and, you know, do all that, we could go from 1 room to 20 rooms. Or let's say that we could enslave half the population and we could go from 1 room to like 500 rooms. We can make it way bigger. It seems like the argument that you're kind of making now is that, like, well, we did so much in this country on the back of slave labor, and so many white people got so rich. Like, hold on, like, I don't think it's realistic to like pay them back because like we grew so much off of them. Like, slave labor was so good for so much of the country that, like, I don't know if it really makes sense to pay them back now because it was so profitable. And it feels like in that way you're like getting triply fucked, because it's like, fuck, like enslaving my ancestors was so profitable to you that now you can't even like consider paying me back for, you know, like all the wages that were stolen from my family. Now I feel like triply fucked here, you know?
Yeah, that's completely the situation. I mean, it's a similar situation with the Native American example, right? Not necessarily a perfect parallel, as the both groups of people have different histories, but like it's just that, guess what? We just can't pay back the Native Americans what they're morally owed just because it's too much cash. Get fucked. It's literally that situation. It sucks, but that's the way that it works.
It was during the late 60s and the early 70s. In 1972, a settlement was reached with the tribes where they paid the tribes, I think it was somewhere in the area of between $25 and $30 million for the land that was lost, which the traditionalists were saying, no, don't take the money. We need the land back. The people who were on the tribal council at the time saw the real value as being the money. So that's what they did. They voted to accept the money.
Here's a question for each of you. I don't know if either of you have considered this. How would you figure out who gets reparations if we were to target this based on like descendants of slavery?
Ooh, this is fun. Okay, actually, I had a thing prepared for this too. We never got to it. So you're asking here, like, if we're agreeing to give reparations on X amount and X and Y method to black people, to African Americans, how you determine who, like, how black must one be?
Yeah, so I guess to qualify this,
slaves.
Yeah,
so what are the metrics for it?
To qualify this initially, we would be talking, I imagine, obviously, we would be talking about like African Americans as the descendants of slaves. If you immigrated here from Africa, you're not part of this conversation. Past like 1960 or whatever, right? You're not part of this conversation. So like those kinds of recent, and then probably not if you weren't like the descendant of a slave. If you immigrated otherwise, you're probably not part of this conversation. But then past that, how do you figure who gets? How do you divvy up compensation? Is it like your great grandfather would have been owed? I don't even know how far back you could even reliably trace a lot of this too, because of how lost all the records are. But let's say you were to figure out like your great grandfather should be owed with interest, with the land that he was promised, with the wages, about $10 million. Let's say that you chase down that entire black family tree and there's like 100 people. You know, does every single person just get $10,000, or is it like, how do you? Yeah, this is a pretty like. Yeah, I think just as a clarification point on this, so 1870 was like the first census after the emancipation, when when African Americans were listed on documents. So that would probably be your starting point, and then you have to figure from there on out if they were enslaved or had been enslaved or not, I guess. But yeah, that would have been that would be like your earliest starting point where you could start from there. Did you want to say something relevant?
I mean, I don't know how accurately even that documentation, well, yeah, I agree that's going to be your starting point, how accurate that documentation is going to go. But also something else to note is would I, as somebody who, this is going to sound weird, but it's definitely something that to be considered, is every single person who is a descendant of a slave going to receive the exact equal amount if that was the...
I think you would have to. I think if we were doing this in any reasonable way, you would just have to average together all of the slave labor and go from there. Because there's no fucking way you're going to be able to determine like people that lived in this part of the country worked harder than these or whatever. Like I don't think that's going to be possible.
And if you averaged it out, would are we assuming that you'd split it evenly amongst every single slave and then like their descendants?
If I may interject real quick, you have to ask yourself here because I feel like you're looking at this more in the framing of like. I need to quantify the stolen labor definitively and that labor's monetary worth and then give it to the person and kind
of...
The
only reason why I asked that is because there is genuinely people that are not black, that are descendants of slaves. And so I was wondering if those people would receive the same amount of money as, like, for instance, you or me, who, well, I'm assuming I'm a descendant of a slave. I mean, I don't know my bloodline.
The question for us is the issue of a grievous injustice that has carried across multiple generations, that has denied Black Americans the material conditions for full citizenship in the United States. It's a debt that needs to be paid, and it's a debt that needs to be paid regardless of what the social system or the overarching social system is. I will say this, one thing that's unique about the way in which we conceive of a reparations plan is that we would want to make equal payments to all recipients. This would mean in turn that the Black American community would have an extraordinarily high degree of wealth equality. And this would be unique and this would be game changing in terms of the way in which this country functions and lives. I think we estimate that you would go from a situation in which the ratio of the median to mean level of wealth among Black Americans would rise from about 13% to 87%. And this would be unprecedented. And so the Black American population would look very different within whichever social system is surrounding it in some sense. And its capability to actually act on that system and perhaps hopefully change it for the better would be a lot different than its capability is in the present moment.
Maybe
I have a pretty cool opinion about this actually. So ultimately here, I'm actually not really a fan of this whole like figuring out how Black one must be to get compensation.
I agree with that. Yeah.
Kind of, to me, just it's reminiscent of the paper bag test back when segregation was around. You know, you put a paper bag, brown bag next to someone's skin. If they're darker than that, you know, color fountain you go, colored dining room you go. If you're brighter than that, okay, whatever. You're white enough. You know, just completely rooted in ignorance here. If we're looking at a certain qualification of like how Black one must be, it's trivial for me to enforce here a 1/16th, 1/32nd threshold or whatever the number of increments is going to be here, because we're talking about 200 years of descendants. We're talking about again as many as 7 generations of overdue compensation to be done, and ultimately, even if I am whatever 1/64th Black, who fucking cares, right? Because like, what if I am like 1/8 Black hypothetically here, but I passed Black, I still have to suffer through what I would dub the Black experience of discrimination, of statistical disadvantage, of oppression and things like that. We can all reinforce the statistics here. So if I'm being treated like I'm Black, what fucking difference is it here in any way?
I'm actually curious. What if you're genuinely white passing? And like, what if there was a white person that like literally fucked a slave? This is gonna be like 1 in a million.
Well, wait, we don't have to say 1 in a million. What if there was like a slave owner that raped like a Black slave woman and then they had offspring?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, this is actually very common, by the way.
Yeah,
very common, but I should say here, I remember reading here, and forgive me on citation for here, but I remember reading here that even though it was very common for a black person to be accused of raping white women in segregation times and whatnot, and often it resulting in things like lynchings and whatnot, that very often it was actually, or more often, more frequently, it was the white slave owner that would rape their black female slaves way more often than the other way around. Just because of the overwhelming power dynamic there that was going on. That shouldn't be too surprising, though, honestly. But
and so the whole point of me like bringing that up is I was just curious because you talked about when I was referencing somebody that might not be considered black or what have you. You were talking about like black passing people. I'm wondering what your opinion would be if like there's somebody who's been in like 4 generations of their bloodline have been white passing people, but they have a descendant of a slave. Like, is it just... Are we cool with that? I mean, I think ultimately speaking, we have to be cool with that. If we agree that you can't, yeah,
I'm very relaxed here. Earlier when I was bringing up my implementation of how I would execute this, if you recall here, my criteria were 2 things, either or being met here. You live in an area that is victim to a lot of the problematic black statistics that we can all cite are forms of oppression for black people. If you reside in these areas, I would argue that you have been victim to the black experience, and I'll thought to be able to like do something with that. And or you can if you don't reside in these problematic areas, what we would now dub the ghettos that were spawned from racist bank institutions and redlining. You would if you're a minority, if you're a POC, if you're a black person or whatever, and you're not in those areas, you can then I don't know. This is where it gets a little bit ambiguous here, but it's like, I guess you just determine how black you are. I don't know. I don't really see like a ethical way to paywall how black one must be.
Yeah.
But I suppose here, as long as if you have some black in you, sure, why not?
It seems like you'd have to qualify
on a macro level here. What we're doing here is we're just like we're doing an injection of like hardcore UBI to lift up that poverty floor that's way too low. And admittedly, this is more this is partially now related to the economic policy that we've been under here since Reaganomics in general. So forgive me for making a little bit of a pivot here, but ultimately you are kind of dealing with that issue too now. So I don't really see a negative in overspending to fix that issue as well here by not really enforcing a strict paywall for the barrier to be black enough to get reparations.
I think on this, it's a function of what you think reparations are to do. Or what they're for. So if reparations are to recompense people for slavery, then it probably matters how, quote unquote, how black you are. Yeah. If somebody is like literally like black mom, black dad, both slaves, child, and then that child has a child with another person who's black mom, black dad, was a slave, and then that whole family is like pure 100%, that they should probably be compensated more than like, slave, non-slave, and then the 128th or 128th slave descendant. It like would probably be more fair. If you view for reparations as a form of like recompensating somebody for like lost wages for land that was promised. But if your goal of reparations, which both of you seem to be more on the same page, if your goal of reparations is just to like generally uplift, black communities in the United States, then doing that type of purity test is probably not good. And then also for a second issue would probably also serve to fuck over mixed race people in the United States, who already kind of have a pretty shitty experience. Now get to have an extra thing over your head where it's like, listen, man, like not only do we tell you you weren't really black, like we got like 10 times more money than you because you're definitely barely black. Like you're not enough a descendant of slave. You don't have the same lived experiences we do. Yeah. And that would probably further serve to like create that division even harder.
Are you talking about giving people a big check, Sandy? Like tell us exactly what you have in mind for what that looks like, this reparations program.
So in our book, we talk about maybe 3 central characteristics of a reparations project. The first thing we talk about is who should be eligible to receive it. And we propose that there should be 2 criteria. First, what we refer to as a lineage standard, which is an individual would have to show that they have at least one ancestor who was enslaved in the United States. And then the second is what we refer to as an identity standard. So for up to 12 years prior to the enactment of a reparations project or the enactment of a study commission for reparations, then an individual would have to show that they self-identified as Black, Negro, or African American. So if they meet those two criteria, then they would be eligible to receive reparations payments.
Listening to Reset Race, you're now tuned in to Reset Race. You're listening to Reset Race, you're now tuned in to Reset Race. Put them back on the grill again. We grilling them, put them back on the grill again. We grilling them, put them back on the grill again. We grilling them, back on the grill again. We grilling them, You're listening to Reset Race. ADOS need reparations to make America great. You're tuned in to Reset Race. We no longer starving while others eat off our plate. No. You're listening to Reset Race. We focused on our justice claim. We know what is at stake. You're tuned in to Reset Race. You'll find out who really about justice and really who fake. Lineage go back to U.S. Southern plantations. Lineage, Jim Crow and mass incarceration. Redline and lynchings. We are old from this nation. You're not about justice if you ain't for reparations. MG the wise one. Cousin mother intellectual. Samantha bringing fire. Anti-black, we pressing you. No permanent friends and no permanent enemies. The backbone of the country. The way you need our energy. You gon' see. Listening to Reset Race. You now tuned in to Reset Race. You're listening to Reset Race. You're now tuned in to Reset Race. Put them back on the grill again. We grilling them. Put them back on the grill again. We grilling them. Put them back on the grill again. We grilling them. Back on the grill again. We grilling them. You're listening to Reset Race. ADOS need reparations to make America great. You're tuned in to Reset Race. We no longer starving while others eat off our plate. No. You're listening to Reset Race. We focused on our justice claim. We know what is at stake. You're tuned in to Reset Race. You'll find out who really about justice and really who fake.
Until you do right by me, everything you think about is gonna crumble.